Good afternoon, it's Vick Hope here. It's just gone 1:05, and you're listening to the Lunchtime Show here on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. The best music and most important headlines taking you through till 3 p.m. That was, of course, Diana Ross with Upside Down. Actually, that's a song that me and my mum used to make up dance routines to when I was little. We used to perform them for my dad and my brothers after dinner. Did anyone else do that? No? Right, okay.
BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
Coming up on today's show, I mean, it's unavoidable. We're going to have to talk about it. There would be a massive elephant in the room if I didn't. I think you know what I'm on about. I will be chatting to the man in everyone's firing line in just over an hour. You might have to restrain me. I'll leave that one there. Also today, I'll be welcoming into the studio Nick Carter from Cambridge Stop the War. Now, all week we have been inundated with some incredibly disturbing, some bloody and shocking images of what's going on in Iraq. If you were about in Cambridge on Tuesday evening, around the Guildhall, you'll have seen a demonstration was staged by Cambridge Stop the War, opposing military intervention in Iraq. I'll be challenging Nick about the fact that this demonstration actually coincided with the Iraqi government's formal request to America for airstrikes against insurgents. That's coming up soon. Also, do you know your neighbours? Have you ever had water thrown from the balcony above for making a little bit too much noise? Yeah, not my fault. In the chat room today, we'll be exploring our relationships with those living just next door after Britain was given the title of loneliest country in Europe. I want to hear from you. Drop me a line.
Call BBC Radio Cambridgeshire 08459 25 2000. This is BBC Radio Cambridgeshire.
All that and more coming up. But first, there's nothing like getting a bit kinky on a Friday. It's the Kinks. The Kinks there with You Really Got Me. Yeah, we didn't hear a lot of that last night, did we? No. In case you didn't watch the match or you've been under a rock, England lost their second group match against Uruguay. Actually, no, correction. England lost against Luis Suarez, debatably one of the best strikers in the world, meaning A, I am gutted. I'm a big football fan, you might know this. And B, we're relying entirely on the performance of other teams to get through to the next stage. I'm trying to be optimistic, but I mean, it's just not looking likely. And unbelievably, in a BBC Radio Cambridgeshire first, Roy Hodgson will be joining us to field your questions. Let's try and keep it clean, guys. Let's try to actually keep it 2 questions. But yes, what do you want to ask him? Drop us an email on cams@bbc.co.uk or text 81333 starting a message with Cam. The questions are in your hands. Meanwhile, I'll just sit here weeping. Rather ironically, this is the Pasadenas with I'm Doing Fine Now. I mean, I'm not. After which, we'll get an update on the situation in Iraq and talk to Nick Carter from Cambridge Stop the War. The Pasadenas there with I'm Doing Fine Now. Here on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire, it's 1:15. Is Western military intervention in Iraq the lesser of two evils? News has been coming in thick and fast this week about devastating violence in Iraq as fighting continues between Sunni Islamic militants from the group ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and government forces, including the Shia militia. Iraq's Prime Minister, Nouri al-Maliki, is appealing to the country to unite against Sunni militants. And today, details have emerged of how America plans to help the Iraqi government fight the insurgents after al-Maliki made a formal request to them for airstrikes. 300 military advisors are now being sent to the region and will work alongside Iraqi security forces to try to repel the group rather than carrying out the airstrikes. Cambridge Stop the War, who organised a demonstration outside the Guildhall on Tuesday night, fear that the United States will launch airstrikes against the Iraqi insurgents. I'm joined in the studio now by Nick Carter from the organisation. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Vic. Thanks for having me on to talk about what is a very important topic.
Absolutely. Now, first, can you tell me a little bit about the demonstration, also what the general feeling was amongst attendees on Tuesday night outside the Guildhall?
I think, especially when we look to Iraq, we can see that in the past the military action and what they hoped it would achieve has failed. Simply as that. And now it looks like we could be moving towards a re-escalation of that. Lots of people just want to say that, no, we've had enough, it doesn't work. Storming in and showing force arguably has let us into the position that we are now in. I don't think it's helping, I think it's hindering.
But the Iraqi government requested this military intervention around the same time that you were demonstrating, actually. In fact, they requested airstrikes.
This is a real concern because the phrase that I hear bandied around by quite a few politicians is to send a message. And I think it does send a message, but I also think it sends the wrong message, a very dangerous message, that airstrikes is the way to sort a problem. Now, if that was the case, it would have been sorted a long time ago when the invasion first happened, when George W. Bush and Tony Blair went in all guns blazing, gung-ho, to try and solve this problem. Clearly hasn't worked.
Well, we actually just heard this morning from President Obama, and unlike Bush, unlike Blair, he has said there will be no airstrikes. Do you believe him?
I would like to think that he's learnt from what happened in the past, and he's learnt by the mess that he's inherited by barging in, going to war to try and solve a problem. War happens when you run out of all other options. It shouldn't be the way to send a message. It shouldn't be the way to try and make a point. It's because diplomacy has failed.
Here in the UK, in the Commons, David Cameron again ruled out military intervention by the UK, but he made clear that Britain would not sit back and allow the insurgents to succeed. Is there any way of doing that other than military intervention? What does Stop the War propose as alternatives?
I think it's all about understanding what's happening on the ground, and I think politicians who are sitting miles away can very easily make statements about going to war or not going to war. I mean, I think the two actually cancel each other out. I'm not sure what has been promised. There will be no intervention, or there will be. I'm not really sure they have a clear idea of how to move this forward. I think there are local people on the ground with a better idea that will also have learnt that military intervention hasn't helped. It's got us to this point. Tony Blair pushing his way into the Middle East and causing these problems, I think, has left a legacy of issues, not solutions.
Tony Blair aside, because looking back is not necessarily going to change the future. What's done is done. In fact, even Julian Huppert, the Cambridge Stop the War, the MP for the Liberal Democrats here in the city of Cambridge, who backed Cambridge Stop the War, he was an opponent of the 2003 invasion. At the time, he said 2 bombs don't make a right. But even he, just to respond to what you said there about looking back, he said, Iraq is a mess, but it's partly our mess. We do have a responsibility to clear up our mess. So we're looking forward. We can't dwell on what has happened before, parties aside, whether you're Liberal Democrat like Julian is, or whether you're Labour like Tony Blair is, how else can we clean up a mess?
I think the way to solve a problem is not to do more of what caused the problem. That makes no sense to anybody. Julian Huppert is right. It is a mess, and it is partly our mess, and solving it by going and doing even more of what created that initial problem, mess, situation, is not going to progress the issue in any shape, way or form. It could arguably set us back. And I think when you look at history, when you look at the British Empire, we've had the experience of being in wars and learning from them and what they can and what they cannot do for us. And I think we just need to apply the burden of history here again. It is a mess. His words are absolutely correct. Let's not make it worse by repeating our mistakes.
This said, there are a number of different types of mess. Now, the United Nations have actually just today released some figures showing a record amount of people were displaced by war or persecution, another type of mess, in 2013. The figures rose 6 million to 50 million. Obviously, the war in Syria was the main cause, but this encompasses both persecution and war. So in instances where intervention could prevent or put an end to persecution, does that not make it the lesser of two evils? In the long run, fewer people could be displaced or even die.
I think these figures talk about the persecution and, you know, how many people have suffered. To add war to it, I think will only increase the numbers. I seriously believe that going to war is not a way to reduce human and civilian casualties and fatalities.
Well, it will, of course, be interesting to see the way that those 300 military advisors approach the issue. As you said, maybe war is not the way, but we want to see what the alternatives can be. Following today's news that they will be sent over to Iraq from the States, how does this affect the stance of Cambridge Stop the War? Because obviously beforehand you wanted to make a point that they shouldn't be going. They've gone now. What are you going to be doing moving forwards? Is there going to be another demonstration here in Cambridge?
We certainly haven't ruled it out. There was a slight respite in the fact that there won't be airstrikes, which are just indiscriminate and kill, not only military personnel, but civilians, innocent people. So we were hopeful that when we heard that from the United States, that there may be a way forward here, a better way of dealing with this. So this is really disappointing. Our stance will not change.
Well, thank you very much, Nick Carter of Cambridge Stop the War. We'll be hearing later from our reporter on the ground in Iraq. And also, as Britain has been given the title of loneliest country in Europe, the charity Age UK today launches a campaign focused on neighbours called the Big Chinwag to help with 1 million older people in the country who go a month or more without seeing or speaking to anyone. We've been asking you to get in touch about your relationship with your neighbours. Keep it clean, please. That's after this beaut from Sam Smith. This is Stay With Me.